You are listening to AVFC Extra, a no-nonsense look at the club we all love. Brought to you by the Claret and Blue podcast.
Hello and welcome to AVFC Extra. I'm James Rushton. Today I'm joined by a very special guest indeed who's going to tell us all about the impact a football club such as Aston Villa can have on the local community. Whether it's through the Villa Foundation or actions by players such as Jack Grealish or even stuff like the Big Villa Sleep-In, the Villains can make a massive difference in the local area around the club. But not just that. In the city of Birmingham at large, within the entire fan base, whether you're based in places like Cincinnati, Chicago, Hong Kong or New Delhi, the Villa can make a difference, and that's been proven. So Kerry Lenihan will be joining me today to talk us through the impact a football club can have, especially when it comes to, the topic of food. We'll be speaking a lot about food banks, a bit about Marcus Rashford, and the difference that individuals within a fan base can make. I hope you enjoy, and I hope there's a lot to learn. Here we go. So, Kerry, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, James. How are you?
I'm good, yeah. Glad that we can get your expertise on here to kind of dive into a bit of a deep issue, probably the deepest issue we've actually tackled on the podcast, bar Aston Villa, of course, and all their shenanigans over the past few months. But, before we get into it, can you just tell us what your background is and why we might be speaking to you today?
Yeah, of course. So I guess first and foremost, I'm a lifelong Villa fan. But in terms of the wider picture, my day job is in marketing, but I am involved in a lot of voluntary work in Birmingham, in the local community, dealing with things like food poverty, homelessness, the alleviation of poverty within that area. And I guess that's what you want to talk to me about. So yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, I haven't brought you on here to surprise you and go, what's a food bank? Tell us. I demand to know what a food bank is now. But obviously we know each other through Villa, but you must be missing these Villa away days. You couldn't really stop talking about them when you're on them. All the shenanigans, the story of the away day experience. You lived it each and every weekend, so missing those, right?
Oh, absolutely. Kes's coaches is sadly retired at the moment, but we'll look forward to the day when it comes out of retirement. But I mean, it's not just the away days, it's everything, isn't it? Like the whole experience is just not the same as watching it through a stream or a screen or whatever. Missing it a lot, missing the people as well. So it's nice to actually see a familiar face. So it's a bit of a strange time, but I look forward to it coming back.
It's perfect there. You brought up probably our first topic, which is community. And as we record, Kerry, you got to tell us, there's been 3 straight Villa games pushed onto this new kind of pay-per-view platform. I know I've not paid for them. I'd have probably struggled actually to pay for them all with the Sky Sports things, to be fair. All the proceeds of that are going to Premier League clubs to kind of do what they want with. There might be some community benefit from that, but mostly it seems to be funneling funds to Premier League clubs. What's your take been on this kind of plan so far? Because it has been divisive.
Yeah, well, I think, it's gone down like a lead balloon, hasn't it, amongst the fans and the wider footballing community. I think it was a mistake to begin with from the start. And I'm not entirely sure how they came to, the price for it or what the background as such is. But I don't think fans feel like they were consulted or had any say, and they're just expected to outlay this extra fund. It also doesn't seem to be any kind of fair distribution amongst the clubs. So as you mentioned, Villa are on 3 times the last few weeks, the next one on Sunday. Man City no games at all on pay-per-view. So yeah, I think that's rattled a lot of fans as well, because you're always going to have that underlying rivalry amongst, why us, why not them? There's a wider issue, not just the cost, but the fairness of the distribution as well.
That comes with a positive, right? And that's, fans like yourself have led initiatives, and there's been an incredibly positive impact through this hashtag charity, not pay-per-view, not PPV campaign. So fans like, Leeds United, we have to mention them again, Leeds United, Liverpool, Newcastle, Man United, and I've seen the Spirit of Shankly as well, again, going back to Newcastle, as well as Aston Villa. And, people have raised impressive amounts of money. Could you just kind of dive into a bit of that background? How are Villa fans getting involved? How's yourself getting involved? And what are the figures being raised around?
Yeah, of course. So I've got really good relations with the fans up in Newcastle who were behind the initial idea. And there's a group of us actually in a WhatsApp group, fans supporting food banks across all the Prem clubs, and some of the EFL clubs as well and lower leagues. And we all just decided to jump on board and push it across our respective fan communities. It's very simple. We're asking people to donate their would-be PPV fee to someone in need rather than feeding the greed. And the response has been phenomenal. Like, people are really getting on board with this. I think it kind of echoes the feeling across the country at the moment. There's better places that money could be spent. So yeah, the Villa fans, we're nearly on course to raise £4,000 now, which is amazing. Like, the food bank really appreciates that. But up and down the country, I think probably between us, maybe like 500,000. We're hoping to push on and keep raising those funds. But yeah, great response so far.
It's an enormous amount of money across the board being raised for a genuinely good cause, and it's obviously something that's very relevant. And I mean, we'll bring his name up and speak about him later on, Marcus Rashford, but it's very much in vogue right now for this. I'm not doing it down, but it is very popular right now to raise money specifically for this cause. So again, I think when you're dealt that kind of thing, like making lemonade out of lemons, isn't it? When you're dealt this thing, it goes £15, we've got to pay for matches now out of nowhere. And this has come off the back of it, which is fantastic. So, from seeing the reaction from Villa fans, it's just a massively positive thing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, we really appreciate the relationship that we've had in the past with the fans and the food bank. Obviously, we've ran different collections. We've had like curry night, we've had carol service at the church, various different things. But I think this is reaching a wider base of people, because often we'll find at collections at matches, people aren't always aware or they don't really know like what a food bank does or, what's behind it. Whereas this is really turning fans' frustration at PPV into action, into something positive. So yeah, that's kind of how we see it as well.
I know. So going back to the kind of football aspect of it, I mean, I remember specifically Rudy Gestead and Jordan Ayew being particularly involved with feeding communities, sometimes through Aston Villa, sometimes off their own backs, just doing this. So there's obviously a few footballers doing this. It seems to be a norm now. I know you brought up a few names yesterday, speaking to Omar on Villa Talks, and I know you mentioned it to Ash in an article in the description about Aston Villa's connection to local food banks. But I think when we did it, it was Neil Taylor was doing it at the same time. So, footballers are not like promoting it or anything, but they are getting involved pretty much weekly with this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's great that we're kind of reaching a place whereby footballers are becoming more engaged with the community they effectively work in. It's kind of a new role model, and it's quite inspiring to see that, a lot of the time with footballers, the fans will listen to what they say, just because they have this kind of elevated position within society, I guess, on a level. So yeah, the more they can get involved, even just like, one tweet from someone in the current team as a massive reach compared to, what I'm reaching on Twitter. So we really appreciate any support. Yeah, funny about Gestead and Ayew, actually, they come down to our street feeds before, just turned up, and a lot of people were like, who are these? But I was like, oh my God. Yeah, so it's quite funny because you still think like, oh my God, I'm a fan and this is a footballer, but essentially they just wanted to help out in the community as well. So
I think you mentioned a decent sized intervention from James Chester, who we all know to be a great guy. I mean, our mutual friend Dave Farris managed to get a personal message of him after his holiday was cancelled. But like, that is the low bar, and I feel like you've mentioned it in the article with Ash about what he's kind of done for the local food banks around Aston Villa's local area.
Yeah, I mean, I cheekily just reached out to him on Instagram actually and was like, oh, James, can you send something out? And he was like, yeah, I'll speak to the squad, like I'll get them to do something. And then I think that's how actually we ended up getting a bit more of a connection with the foundation as well, because they were like, okay, we need to take this on board, we need to do something. So yeah, really appreciated his input there.
So before we kind of jump into the explanation of food banks, what they are, how Villa are involved, and what have you made of Villa's community work? Because I mean, the foundation does a lot of good stuff, and I think maybe that could be publicised a lot more. Maybe fans aren't as aware of it as they should be, but through my interactions and my experiences, they've always seemed to do such amazing and positive work from the get-go. So what have you made of that?
Yeah, the foundation are a fantastic asset to Aston Villa and to the community. The work they carry out is top notch. They're really involved in lots of different projects now, in all different areas. So It's really great and positive to see. I think they are going some way between bridging the gap between the club and the local community, which is something that I spoke to Omar about yesterday, is that, you have these kind of uber rich clubs just placed in a community that the surroundings are much poorer. So the foundation are really getting on board and kind of tackling different problems within the area. I think there is still kind of a feeling that the foundation is standalone and is not as integrated into the club as it could be, which is something I'd definitely like to see more of in the future. I think it's has a bit of a different meaning to fans when it comes directly from the club than when it comes from the foundation. So fantastic work they're doing, but it would be great to kind of hone in and bring it a little bit more rounded together.
Just to jump off script there, I think you mentioned throughout the show you've been tapping onto the theme of clubs in the community. Does your relationship with Aston Villa feel a bit emboldened, or is it kind of on a higher level when there's this action in the community, when kind of the club isn't just this thing that is sprouted out of the local area, it's this thing that has grown out of the local area, it's kind of looking over it as like a guardian, like a sentinel? That's how I feel like Villa Park over Aston and Perry Bar, kind of the Birchfield area. It's surrounding areas. The work it does there, it makes me feel. And it's not just there; it's the work it does in the fan base and in Birmingham at large, and in the national initiatives it backs. It makes me feel a lot more attached to the club. Do you think that is just such, as well as the stuff on the pitch, as well as the training of academy players? What role does this play?
Yeah, I think for me, success should be shared. So if the club's doing well, then you want the local community around it to do well. You want to see both of them kind of thriving. So the more that the club can share its success and share its, I guess at the end of the day, it is monetary. So they're sharing their money for causes within the community and kind of tackling some of those issues, whether that's through the foundation or directly through the players or even fan initiatives themselves, then it can only be better for the club and for the surrounding areas.
So right on to one of our main topics now then. How did you get started out with these food banks? Because we hear a lot about food banks, food for the vulnerable, free school meals. How did you get started out helping them? Because they are a fairly recent thing, aren't they? It's not like rationing or the kind of old school kind of British memorabilia stuff you see. This is a fairly recent thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was completely blasé to all of it because I lived in London for a while, and London is, you've got riches on one side, kind of rags on the other side as such. But yeah, so when I came back to Birmingham about 5 years ago now, I was really surprised at how much deprivation there was, even just walking through the city centre. And I was kind of okay, I feel like I should do something. So I'd been working on a homeless project, which then kind of opened up other doors. I ended up going up to St James's Park, up to Newcastle, for a conference about fans supporting food banks. And basically the idea was, where else really are you going to get that vast amount of people walking through a community on a Saturday where they can actually, give a tin of food or give a bit of loose change? They could really make a difference. So yeah, when I returned, I was really inspired, not just being a Villa fan with the Villa, but I wanted to get all Midlands clubs kind of going on it. So we did collections with Wolves, with Blues, got in touch with West Brom, even the Moors. So it's not just about what the Premier League clubs can do, it's about what clubs in general can do for their communities. And from that, obviously I made a relationship with Aston Nechells Food Bank, and then last March, I think it was now, they asked me to join their board as a director. I think they also want a bit of youth. I don't think they'll mind me saying that. But things like, social media, they'd never really tapped into. Yeah. So, that's kind of my role now, is just getting our cause out there and, trying to get people to help if they can.
So for the viewer that might not be aware, what exactly is what's the role of a food bank? What does it do? Because I think there's a few people that might have the wrong idea wherever they've got it from, that you can kind of go there and sometimes get whatever you want, and then there's the other extreme where they just kind of give you a few lentils or anything to help you make some basic meals throughout a week. But I feel like there's a bit of in between that's really missed out on. Yeah,
so in quite simple terms, the food bank is a service whereby people are in crisis. crisis. So they've got no access to food for whatever reason that might be. We're not at all judgmental. People can come in and they take away a 3-day food parcel, which is nutritionally balanced. So we try and give them a bit of everything. And there is a food pick list that helps us to decide what goes into each parcel. Now, in order to access a food bank, most people have to be referred by an agency. So it could be social worker, GP, a school. There's various agencies within Birmingham as well. But obviously, if someone comes to us and they are in desperate need and they don't have a referral voucher, then we can self-refer as well. We'll never turn people away just because they don't kind of tick all the boxes. That's not how we operate. I think people get kind of hung up that it's just kind of a free-for-all. People come in, take as much as they want, walk away. That's not how it works. The idea of a food bank is it's for people who are very much in crisis, and then they will step out of that crisis eventually. We kind of long for the day where there are no more food banks, so we don't want people kind of depending on us. We want it just to be for those people in crisis, and then hopefully we can help them step out of that.
I don't know if you know much about this, but didn't Tyrone Mings, wasn't he related to the use of a food bank in some way? Is that anything you know of?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know the full story, but I know that he used to go to them when he was younger. I know that he did some work back down in Bournemouth. So, I mean, he's more than welcome to come along and help out with Aston Nechells. But yeah, across the country, people are accessing food banks more and more now. And they are, like you say, a growing trend in a way. And I think people are only just now becoming more aware of them. But the idea really is that we tackle the root causes that drives people to use them. We don't just keep them going and expanding them. We'd like to start reducing them,
Yeah, I think it's very clear from what you're saying that, yes, food banks shouldn't exist, but whilst they do, we need to make the most of the campaign and kind of get it to a natural closing point. But what's the balance of that? Is it coming from below? Is it community initiative, or does it need kind of state help? Where do you see that going?
I think there's a bit of both really, because we're completely voluntary run. We rely heavily on the local community and things like the Villa fans, churches, schools to bring donations in for us. But then when we're thinking about what's the next step as what we can do to make sure people aren't coming to food banks, then we have to look wider at what are the root causes of poverty, particularly if we're thinking about Aston Nechells, things like living a fair wage that people don't get, sustainable jobs. Obviously at the moment with COVID, that's even harder. Secure and safe housing, so people aren't constantly spending money on things that they perhaps wouldn't have to in terms of housing repairs. Things like council-led support services. We've seen a lot of cuts across the councils, a lot of cuts to funding for some really essential services that could help people kind of manage their crisis better, or before they actually reach crisis mode. Another one for us is universal credit. So it's not just universal credit, but having, a system that works for everyone and supports everybody how it should do. So I don't know if people probably aren't as aware of universal credit. I've only just really begun to understand it myself, but there's a lot of things around like sanctioning, whereby they're very unnecessary reasons for sanctions. Like the letters might be sent to the wrong address, but then the person is penalised. So things like this can really be ironed out quite quickly, and we can start bringing down the usage and the need for food banks.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a negative cycle, isn't it? I don't want to kind of go into my experiences, but being sanctioned when I was in a position, it was a terrifying experience. And thankfully I have plenty of safety nets, and I'm not in a position where it affected me dramatically, but still realizing that there's not that safety net is worrying. And I feel like the statement you're one bad week from kind of being in a situation where you need to use a food bank, is that something that you see to be true?
Yeah, so I think actually the pandemic has really highlighted that, because what we've seen across Trussell Trust food banks is 52% of people that have used a food bank in the last few months are using it for the first time. And a lot of those people have never imagined that they would even get to, needing to rely on somebody else for a food parcel. I think it just goes to show just how much a lot of people are living on. I say like living on a knife edge. You don't know when that's going to drop, whether it's you lose your job or your washing machine breaks, your car breaks down. There's an unexpected expense and you don't have a safety net to fall back on. So all of a sudden you're like plummeted into this crisis mode. And a lot of people don't always know where to turn to. So things get worse before they actually reach someone they can talk to. And that's why it's vital to have these community services where people can address, issues before they get to crisis level.
Do you have any specific stories from the type of people you've seen use a food bank, or any, interesting kind of moments that have come up from people who you regularly interact with using a food bank?
Yeah, I think it's quite important to point out there's not like one food bank user. There are people across a whole spectrum of different circumstances that would come to the food bank. And a lot of people have in their mind like a stereotypical food bank user. So, it might be, like I said, we've seen over the pandemic, just as a few examples, like people, families where both the parents have lost their job. We've seen a family where both parents were private tutors, so they couldn't actually do their job anymore. And obviously their income funds were completely cut. We've seen single people who just don't earn enough to stretch to having money for food sometimes, particularly when it gets to winter. I think an interesting stat that I saw recently is in Aston Nechells, the average disposable income is £37 a week. So, if you think about in the winter, you've got to have fuel, clothing, food, maybe transport, whether that's bus pass or something, and that just doesn't fit into that small amount of funds. What I always do find quite interesting, though, is that people are very kind of I guess not just grateful, but they don't want to take more than they need. They're more than happy to say, oh, well, I wouldn't use this tin of chickpeas. So, either we replace it for them or they say, oh, no, I'd rather somebody else had that. We've had people who have come and got a food parcel one week and then a few weeks later donated food back, or people who've come and volunteered after they've been needing the food bank themselves. So it is a circle, and, it is hard to get out of that circle. But I think that people are really willing to give back in some way. I don't want people to walk away thinking there's a certain type of person that goes to a food bank and to almost badmouth them in a way, because it could be anybody. It could be you, it could be me.
I think it was interesting you mentioned that sum of £37 a week, and for those who don't know, that food bank supplies Aston Villa's the local area. For if you're an international viewer or international fan who might not be aware, but that £37 a week sum, there's a lot of people. There's a trend where you see people kind of calculating sums and boiling eggs and saying, look, we can do this, we can do that. What do you make of that? Because I think at face value, that is a very when you look at that, you go, oh, of course, but there's deeper levels to it, isn't there?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time these people, they think they live in the real world, but they don't, or they're not really aware of what's happening just outside their window, because people who are using food banks aren't shouting about it like, oh, I've just got my food parcel. That's not how it works, and there's so many other things to take into account than just food. So, I mentioned some stuff about winter then, but in the summer, for example, if you're a single parent and suddenly you've got 3 children home over the summer, then your bills are going to increase naturally. And then when it comes to the end of the summer and you're thinking about, I need to buy a new school uniform for these 3 children, like again, your costs are being allocated elsewhere. And how do you prioritise, what is best? Sometimes it's really hard for people to do so, and they don't have sufficient funds to sit down and kind of make those decisions, because it could be losing the roof over your head or going hungry for a day, or you're going to have to walk 5 miles or something to work. People will make compromises to try and work around, but at the end of the day, money only stretches so far.
So do you think in kind of the short to kind of long term, with everything going on, do you see food bank usage increasing, and how important do you think it is that, if you're in a community, you look out for your own? So if you're an Aston Villa fan, to my mind, like there is probably 99.9% of Aston Villa fans, if they genuinely knew another Villa fan living next door to them or wherever was in trouble, that would help. So I feel like that community spirit is still, even in these strange times, is still going to be very important. So, from what you're saying, it only seems like this is something that's going to go up unfortunately, the usage of a food bank?
Yeah, so food bank usage has been rising year on year anyway. So when we take into account, this year there's been a global pandemic as well, we're still 30% up on what our highest ever peak has been. I think one week we were, 200% over what we'd normally do in a week in terms of giving out parcels. So yeah, numbers are going to keep rising. I think in terms of the community, it's important to kind of touch on two things here. The first is the Villa community doesn't just mean people that live in Aston. Like, this is much wider. You could live all over the globe, but like you said, James, like, it is a community and it's a force for good if used in the right way. So I think having people, donate or where they can, like, share the story, or just, like you invite me on here to talk about this, getting that message out can only highlight the issues, but also hopefully that can kind of see the community act for good and enact some change. The second thing is, people, they have their own local communities. So I've talked heavily about Aston, just because that's what I know. But I mean, I don't personally live in Aston, I live in Yardley, and there's things here that I could also talk about. So, if there is something in your community that you can see as an issue, then, start making small changes, because eventually you'll get that ball rolling and big change can come. Don't just sit back and think, oh, that's really bad, but what can I do about it? Because you'd be surprised. A lot of people probably feel the same.
Yeah, I think, going briefly off topic, saw the story of this Villa fan in Minnesota, Jason Yu, who came down with terrible Stevens-Johnson syndrome. I'm no doctor, but it looked like he was in a really bad time. And Villa fan, a lot of the community, his own community, rallied around him, but a fair number of those were Villa fans who raised, it's in America, the healthcare costs of dealing with such a thing are tremendous, but Villa fans were there to back him. And I think, regardless of your political persuasion, whatever, when push comes to shove, I feel like if you're in a community, you are looking out for your own. It's just taking that little step further, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of, at the moment, there's a lot of, people feel like they have the opportunity to take that step. So yeah, grasp it and go with it, because even if you just change one person's life, then that is still great.
Yeah, I think what we saw as well, to kind of go towards the finish line of this, is Marcus Rashford's intervention, because it's not just he's come out and he's looked after Man United fans. I saw a tweet yesterday, and his specific actions led to, I think it was the Chesterfield Spy Rights Trust kind of intervening in a certain local case with a family who had been in temporary housing or whatever had gone on, but they were looking at a bad situation. That entire community is now rallied around them. So yeah, it might be petitioning the Prime Minister and doing this and doing that, but at a hyper local level, it is changing things for the better, and that is come from one footballer's actions.
Yeah, I think with Rashford, I mean, to me, he is a true influencer. So, we have this like new title, influencers, but he is actually influencing change, not just at local level, but like you say, on a national scale. And there's a lot to be said for community organising. Like, it doesn't matter if you're right, left wing, people can generally agree on what is right and what is wrong. And if you organise your community in a way to solve a problem which affects that, then you'll be doing some good. I think with Rashford as well, people are long debated, should footballers be role models? Should they just entertain on the pitch? And I mean, at the moment he's doing both, but it's great to have someone so young using their voice and, being so loud about something which is so important to so many people.
So, on a finishing note, this free school meals debate, to me, it doesn't feel like it should be a debate. We're talking about, a vulnerable set of the population. But what have you kind of made of the whole it is a saga now, isn't it? It has been made into a saga. What have you made of that?
Yeah. For me, like you said, it is no debate, feed the children, but in the simplest of terms. But I feel like I don't know how people can really sit back and have anything to say against it. Like, I know people are saying, oh, well, there's other causes, and yeah, like I've mentioned throughout this, I agree there are other root causes to poverty and why people are suffering, but don't let them suffer just while you work on the other causes. Like, do what you can now and then build from that.
Perfect. Well, where can people find you if any further questions? I'm sure there could be plenty coming off the back of this, and I really do hope that it might have inspired a few of you to kind of get involved with your local area. I know it's really tough right now, but even if it's waiving your 50, 40, 95 pay-per-view fee, just to donate it to a good source, whether that's Acorns or the Aston Nechells Food Bank, Food Trust, then where can they go to find more information?
Yeah, well, obviously I'm very active on Twitter and I'm more than happy to have any conversations with people. You can find me on there, Kerry Lenihan 21. But if you want to find out about the Aston Nechells Food Bank, you can visit the website astonnechells.foodbank.org UK. Have a look at that. But I think what I should also mention is that, you know, there's no pressure to give to the food bank. It could be any local cause within your community that you feel like needs some help at the moment. So if you want any advice around, you know, community organising, like I said, or, you know, where to start, then I'm happy to talk about that as well.
So to finish, what is the one thing that a listener could do or viewer to do to support their local community today if they don't have the money or if they cannot leave the house for whatever reason? What can they do right now to make a difference?
Yeah, if you don't have money to spare, if you don't have time, then just start talking, start raising your voice, start speaking to the right people, whether that's your MP or someone local in your community that can enact change. And yeah, just start making some noise, because that's how problems get solved.
Perfect. Thank you very much for coming on, Kerry.
Right. No worries. Thanks for having me.
Due to the fairly sensitive nature of things we brought up today, you yourself, a listener we don't know, might feel that they need help or are in trouble in a certain situation. Hopefully there's plenty of links in the description below to help you out. And if you do need any more help, you do know where to find us, and don't be afraid to reach out, or if you do need that help. You can find more of Kerry on the Villa Talks podcast and also in an article we've linked in the description below, and there's plenty to do. Ourselves in the community and yourself. So if you do need help, please reach out, because you know where to find it.
Thank you for listening to AVFC Extra, an additional dose of Aston Villa content for you, brought to you by the Claret and Blue podcast team. If you enjoyed the episode, please do get in touch with us, get involved in the comment sections, tweet us at Claret Blue Pod, or leave us a review on iTunes. We really do appreciate it. We'll catch you again very soon with some more content. Until then, up the Villa.